Hola, piloncillos. Welcome to the Offerings of Copal podcast. This is your host, Cihua Mazatl. I'm here today with a special guest, Patricia Cruz, here with us for episode 10. And I'm very excited to introduce her to you. Some of you may have already gotten acquainted with her on the feed. Some of you already follow her work. If you don't, I highly encourage that you do. Patricia Cruz is a Chicana artist. She's a Chicano Park muralist and activist. She was born and raised in the border town of San Diego, CalifAztlan. Her spiritual journey as an artist began at the age of 14. In 2012, she became part of the Chicano Park mural restoration, and 1 year later, she was invited to restore a temporary mural at Chicano Park that is now a part of Chicano Park's permanent collection. She has continued to paint at Chicano Park and work on community public art projects. She is the co-founder and owner of Aztlan Libre community space, shop, and gallery located in Barrio Logan, San Diego. Cruz previous employment includes the San Diego Museum of Art as a project coordinator for the Open Spaces Public Art Program and executive director at the Sherman Heights Community Center. And yeah, so she's here with us today. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with her and to be able to share some of the magic that happens when we get together. I had the privilege to be able to spend a whole week with her. It's been like 2 weeks ago since we did our art installation, and we just had to do this podcast together and share some of what happened during that time. So welcome, Patricia, to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Excited to get into this conversation that is, well, we've had the conversation, but the podcast long overdue. We've talked about it for some time.
Yes. Well, let's talk a little bit about the art show that we just had and its significance as a platform for women artists. You know, you've curated the show. This is your 6th time curating this art show. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, what it is?
Yeah, in 2012, I decided that we needed to have, an art show that was for just Chicana artists. And the goal of that show in 2012 was to really create a space where we would have art, poetry, and part of creating that space, I also wanted to have and honor different Chicanas. And so what we did in 2012, and I say we because there was a group of us, a group of women who came together to help me create this show. And so we did it at the spot, which is no longer there anymore. It's here in Barrio Logan on Main Street. It used to be on Main Street. But anyway, so we got together, and one of the really important pieces of the show was that we were going to honor all of these Chicanas. And the Chicanas were from activists to teachers to professors to healers to poets to it was really amazing. And of course the artists, but it was an amazing thing to be able to bring together all of these women into one space, because we invited all the women who we were honoring as well. And it was one of those things where I was shocked. I was shocked to see how much this space was needed. And so that was our first show in 2012. It was called Chicana, una decisión consciente. And I'll never forget that I did have some people telling me why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this. You're going to miss someone. Not everyone's going to be on your list, but the requirement really to be in the show was that you had had a positive influence on someone else to be Chicana. And so it was really about asking these artists, well, if we could honor someone that how do you come about to your Chicanismo? How do you come to be Chicana? And how do we honor that person that helped you get there? So
that sounds like it was a really powerful beginning, to something that's grown to be so impactful for so many people. As we're beginning this conversation, I think we have listeners that maybe it's their first time, maybe not their first time hearing the word Chicano or Chicana, or could you expand a little bit more on what that means, especially in the modern context? What does it mean to be a Chicana?
Well, everyone will tell you different, there's different descriptions of what it means to be Chicana. For me, it really is everything that I am. It is the spiritual pieces. It is the indigenous pieces. It is being born here in the United States piece and, speaking English and being brought up in an all Mexican home. But I think one of the most important pieces about being Chicana is how you contribute to preserve culture. A lot of people want to, when I ask, like, are you Chicana? Do you identify as Chicana? I've had a lot of people say to me, well, no, I don't know the history. I want to learn more about my history. And people always refer to Mexica, Aztec, roots, and they want to know Libre, they want to know the diosas, the dioses. And, all of this is beautiful to be able to, share what we know about those dioses, those diosas. But one of the most important pieces too is this political piece and how the word Chicana, Chicano came about and how it carved out space for us, for Chicanos in the early 1960s, to be able to have this identity. People have died for this identity. Like, we can't forget those political pieces. And so for me, it encompasses absolutely everything that I am. When I was 12 years old, I had a counselor. Her name was Mrs. Barrios, and she introduced me to the word Chicana. And previous to that, I really felt lost because I had family in Tijuana, and it was that whole thing like, you don't belong here, like, you're not from here, no eres Mexicana. And then, in the States, it's like people coming up to me asking me if I, even speak English, like I don't look American enough, whatever that may be at the time, And so it was very much, a culture shock and feeling lost in that Nepantla, that that a writer talks about it. I forgot her name, but yes.
Nepantla State.
Sí, it's that state of like, soy de aquí, soy de allá, de donde soy. And so Chicana really gave me that piece of like, okay, well, that little bit of like, okay, it's political, it's activism, it's indigenous, it's at that time, it was Mexican American, now we know that Chicanos come in all kinds of, ethnic backgrounds. It doesn't really matter. But in that time, what I did was just really dig deep and find and find. And when I say dig deep, like family history, like where's our family from, finding myself in, my grandparents being from, Mexico City. And then, from on my dad's side, from Jalisco, all these pieces that made me Mexican, but then not Mexican enough. So, what else? What else am I digging for? And finding the word Chicana and in the history of where we are now, of this land, was everything. Finding that piece that belonged to me, that I could be a part of.
I think that's beautiful. I think I've heard you describe it too as like a landing pad. You said it's like a place to land. And I think there's a lot of individuals out there that maybe don't know exactly where their ancestors are even from, but they know it's not necessarily here, this like, the United States, or, I think it can help those that are looking for an identity, to find something that is belonging. I think identity is a super broad topic and it's very loaded. It's a very loaded thing, but I think Chicano or Chicana is a powerful word, to describe that sort of that place in between, which I think it's almost transient. And, there's like a transient a quality to Chicanismo, or like it's like fluid, it feels kind of fluid. I feel about
Yeah, I agree. I think that it is a landing pad. And I think that, I guess, what the most important thing about being Chicana for me has been the empowerment that it has brought into my life, and the empowerment that I was looking for when I was 12 years old. That's really young to be introduced to a term and then kind of like dig for it in any way that I could, because obviously accessibility to the knowledge isn't always there. Accessibility to books. We're talking about accessibility in college, but I wasn't in college. I was just a kid, there was no internet, there was an encyclopedia, so it's these pieces of like, you have to dig to find your roots. And so empowerment is the key for me. And I tell people sometimes, when I'm talking to broader audiences of different backgrounds, the most important piece about empowerment is that you don't have to be Chicana, you don't have to be Chicano. Find your roots, because your ancestors worked some land, unless you came straight from the crown, your ancestors worked some land, and there's honor in that. There's honor in those roots. And so that's empowering. Knowing where you're from is empowering. And, Chicana did that for me. That's where I landed. And it was the landing pad for me. And it was very much where everything took off from there.
That's really beautiful and powerful. And I hope that, the people listening can find a sense of reflection in that as we explore this, as we're talking about what it means to be Chicana, and this idea of it being empowering. What role do you think being an artist plays into being a Chicana? How's being an artist a tool toward that empowerment of that sense of identity and belonging, that root?
Well, I feel very blessed to call myself an artist. I think it's been present in my life for a very long time. I was 14 years old when I started to paint, and it was a spiritual experience. It was very much like my sister and I, when we were little, my mom took us to this park over on Market Street where we used to live. And my sister and I actually saw, I don't know, we saw an angel, a spirit, you call it ancestor. And I was only about 4 years old, and she's 3 years older than I am. So I remember that clearly. And fast forward to being 14 years old and beginning to be an artist, we were all hanging out as friends, talking about dreams, talking about, trying to decipher what the dreams meant and what do you think this means and that means. And I remember that we're sitting there, just us little homegirls with my sister. And I remember saying, oh, I remember this dream I had one time. And I repeated the vision that I had with my sister about 4 years old. And my sister says, oh, no, I remember that. I remember that. That wasn't a dream. And she finishes the story of the vision. And in that moment, I heard a voice that told me, you have to paint him. And I don't know if it was my voice. I don't know whose voice it was. But that's when my journey as an artist began. And so I really feel like all of us have this journey, this opening that is spiritual, that is led by something much bigger. And I think sometimes we don't talk about it. I think we all have that. Sometimes we credit other people for being an artist, because I could have easily said in this story, oh, I just started, I've been painting since I was little, or I've been drawing since I was little, but that wasn't really the case. The case was that my sister was the artist. She was the one always drawing and doing all these things. Anyway, so fast forward to the journey now, it's been a spiritual journey in that sense, because it began that way. Now, adding the Chicana elements to it, the first things that I was painting was obviously this angel, this ancestor that I saw. And it was a male, and he was Mexica, I'm sure of it. And he was brown and 7 feet tall and black hair and feathers and regalia and all of these, and glistening, all of these beautiful things. And so those features, I was trying to replicate them in my chalk drawings and my color painting. I mean, a 14-year-old that's never painted, and I'm here asking my parents for a canvas and acrylic and paintbrushes, And so they bought all that stuff from me. It was with their support that I was able to even begin this practice. And so over time, it's been the brown faces. It went from trying to paint him, which I never really did, to now, to then painting a lot of brown women, so that we could see ourselves in these pieces, so that we can self-identify and say, whoa, I like this. This feels like me, and then it became, adding some glyphs to that. What does this mean? This essence of this glyph and that glyph, or what is this diosa? Like, let me work with that essence. And in that time while I'm painting and just practicing, really, I think I'm practicing, I'm doing all these things to practice my, my art form. I didn't really realize that I was working with the glyphs essence or with the diosa's essence, but I was. And I think that they continue to guide the work that I do. And I really believe that I'm just a vessel. So when you look at my early work, I mean, you'll see it. It's very, I have to practice. I have to practice. I have to practice. And I think we all begin somewhere. It's very, very different compared to the work that I can do now, from going and doing a portrait of someone in my mind to doing a portrait of someone I actually know, those are very two different levels of art, and so the growth has come slowly over the years with practice, but those Chicana pieces are part of who I am. And I really believe that the ancestors that guided me to paint and be the vessel for this have also guided me to be a Chicana in this lifetime. I don't know what I was in a different lifetime, but I know here, this is my power too. It's to be this artist who is empowered by the movement and who is empowered by painting brown skin, painting diosas, and all of this other fun stuff.
Mm. That is so beautiful to hear all those different elements that have come together, to create, you and your experience and, this vessel, this channel that you are. And I think it really brings it back to how art is such a powerful healing modality, and how art is healing, whether it's empowering, whether you can see yourself reflected, just thinking about the power of that alone, that you said, that you've painted all these different brown faces where people can see themselves in this work. When we go to art museums, we go to these different places, it's always different people, in places of power, people that are brown, are literally, I've seen the paintings even at El Castillo de Chapultepec, the people are on the ground, they're getting stepped on or burned or like just awful things, really displaying the disparity of the power. It's very rare to see images, of where they're in splendor, like where I think there's one painting of Montezuma that's like in all his splendor, and he's pointing out, but for the most part, it's really sad to see that we're not painted that way. And it's also, you know, I think that it's been that systemic enforcement of not letting us even have access to our tools, because if more people had tools, these things, maybe there would be more art with more brown faces. It's just such a powerful reminder.
Yeah, and the accessibility to those institutions too. There's money and there's power and it is systemic. And I really, for me, it became this piece of like, I have to empower all generations, because I realized that I wasn't going to learn more about the Chicano movement or be able to take a Chicano studies class unless I went to college. And so when we talk about accessibility of just our history, it's like, it's not there for us. And so even in painting in 2009, I painted the piece Viva la Mujer, which is Rocky at like 3 years old, and it's one of those things where it was like, so many women look at this and it's not even about the technique that it was done in. It's about the message. It's about a young brown woman painting the words Viva la Mujer on a wall, a baby basically, and I think that we can all see ourselves in these many shades of brown. And it's this piece of like, this piece doesn't belong in a museum. It belongs here in the barrio. It belongs here where our people are. It could be in an office. It could be in different spaces, but it's one of those things where it really is meant to live, for the brown woman to be empowered. And so it's like,
not something to be displayed or turned.
Right. Because even in accessibility, who's accessing all of these institutions, who's paying that cost to get into that door? I know that, maybe a few of us are. I know we can afford it. It's not that we can't afford it, but it's not, we know where we're represented, and it definitely isn't in these institutions. And so I'm happy to make a print of that, to hand it out, to give it away, to sell it, to whatever. It's accessibility sometimes.
That's so powerful. I think I think this is a great transition into, I think you've kind of already answered the question, but why do you think it's important to create spaces specifically for women artists to showcase their work? That isn't, we're talking about like the juxtaposition of it being at a museum, and saying how this piece like Viva la Mujer lives in the barrio, and the space that you've created for this exhibition, still active for everybody listening. You can still come and see it. But this place is in the barrio.
Right. Well, I am reminded with every single show that I curate that we all have to start somewhere. And so in this show, we have a few people who had never shown. Okay. And so we have brand new artists who are taking all of their courage and saying, I'm going to put this on the wall for everyone to view. And that's a necessary step. And so part of this show, part of the Chicana exhibition is to empower other women of all walks of life, of all walks of life. If you are Chicana and you want to show, come show. You're invited. And that's the thing, like, even when I did work at the park, at Chicano Park, and it was like, we have this opportunity to paint a mural. I have never once painted a mural by myself. It's about bringing forth and extending the invitation so that people are empowered. If I was as empowered as I am with, being able to show my artwork in different spaces where I have, I owe that. And it is my responsibility. If I have a space and, we have a gallery here that my husband and I have created specifically for Chicana artists. And now we have this exhibition that's specifically for Chicanas. Like, that's a must. It's a must. And all this to say that it is because of what the Chicano movement has done for me and the empowerment that it's given me and the fire that it feeds, that I want to extend that invitation. That's why it's important. And we have seasoned artists too. Amazing work with seasoned artists. And, it's one of those things where, like, if you love art, if you're an art lover and you are an artist too, and you are, let's say, on Instagram and you're looking up all these different Chicana artists and you're seeing the magnificent work that they are creating and they set the bar for you, we all strive for that higher bar. I know I do. I have seen some beautiful art by beautiful women who are just doing it. They're killing it. Cruz Emilia, who's in our show, Jasmine Puentes, who's in our show. And so, we're talking about women who have shown at the Cheech, and here humbly, they're bringing their pieces to our gallery, showing with other women who are not as seasoned. And to be a part of that group and be able to put yourself in that space with all these other artists who are doing it, they're doing it, is a beautiful blessing for those people who are beginning their journey. I got to show with Yolanda Lopez at Southwestern College, and I will never forget that experience. And it is part of what I think keeps us as artists people going, like,
inspired.
Yeah, I hit that bar. Let me find my next bar. What's my next bar? Who's setting the bar? Oh, wow. I want to do that, And it's this inspiration of movement, of art, of Chicanismo that is out there. At least, I mean, that's how it works for me. I don't know. I mean,
no, I keep, as we're having this conversation, I keep seeing these women, building these platforms. And it sort of reminds me of, seeing how these platforms were created, to restore the murals in Chicano Park. And it's like, oh, let's build the platforms. And then we're like pulling the women onto the platforms. Like, let's do this together, and if you have a platform, it is important that we share. For me, like, this is also what this is for me, like this, whether it's this podcast, or any opportunity that I get to share or inspire, and help elevate those voices is so important. It's so important that we establish those connections, as we move through our work, sharing that inspiration. That's the inspiration that I find, we have to share that inspiration with others, because I kind of see that we're building this big old fire together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you could be an artist that doesn't want to build, and that's okay. Like you're focused on what you're doing, you're focused on your practice, and that's amazing. But for me, there is a sense of responsibility, especially having a community space, having a community gallery. I can't hoard that, like there's no hoarding that. Like we're in it, and this is part of being Chicana. This is the piece that comes from like el plan espiritual de Aztlan, what are those points? Like one of them is we create our own institutions, and maybe you don't consider this gallery, Galeria Mestizaje, an institution. No need. We're good. Like we are here to support. We're here to, showcase what our people can do. And, it's one of those responsibilities. You just have to.
Yes, I absolutely agree. It's our responsibility. I think too, it's important to bring it home and just remember all the doors, whether they've been opened or closed, for us individually, as we've navigated through this path, just those feelings, just because it was difficult for you, or maybe you had to walk through the hazing, or all the people made it harder, because it's been harder in the past. We have to acknowledge, all of the individuals, the women that have paved this road for us too. And, the difficulty that they had to experience, with even being able, like, there's just so much in just taking the female experience, for example, whether it's voting rights, all those things, and let alone like being a brown woman, like to top it all off. And all the difficulty that our predecessors had to go through. And our role shouldn't be to make it at the same difficulty. We shouldn't have to pass on the same thorns, the same,
Right.
like the same weight. We should be trying to make it easier for our younger generations. That's what true healing is about. That's what intergenerational healing is about, ancestral healing, all those things that we throw around. But it's about really having the integrity to do that work, and it is about creating those spaces. And whether people agree or not, it's we have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm all about the hard work and earning your stripes, always, But there is a difference between just being under someone and not being able to like exceed the master, I guess, and then opening up your doors to people who want to build with you, or people who also have contributions. Like we all have contributions, so when I say like earn your stripes, yeah, earn them by giving back. Earn them by bringing the next person forward with you. I just I wouldn't be here if other women hadn't invited me to participate, and if other women hadn't said to me, hey, give me some good criticism, or, allowed me the space to held space for me to do the work that I wanted to do, heard out my ideas for whatever installation, or, and so it's one of these things where like, that's important. It's so important. Like we all have contributions.
Yes, that's so beautiful. Well, speaking of installations, what was one of the main things that really stood out to you from this last process? For those that don't know, we spent about a solid week. It was over 50 hours. I counted. Okay. It was over 50 hours of working on this.
I believe it.
This installation. We created 2 ocelot heads, and with the representation of the night, the yoali, the clouds coming out of their mouths and sort of like floating into the ceiling. It was really powerful. And they also sat on an altar of pirul and frijolitos. It was really, really beautiful.
Las estrellas.
Oh, yes. So yeah, tell me, how was that for you? You know, how does that tie in to this conversation that we're having today?
It was amazing. It was amazing. I think that throughout, well, to begin the process, like we have had a conversation about installation, about doing a show together, all kinds of stuff. And, you know, we're busy, everyone's busy, you know, and so we waited, of course. You know, we knew the show was happening. The show was in November 9th, right? So
Yes,
we knew.
we knew. But it's
We knew 8 months before that. Yeah.
Yeah, the natural fashion. Of course we wait until.
Yes, the procrastination. But we did it. But
part of being an artist.
Yes. But I feel like it all aligned in the way that I don't know what I saw in my mind, but I know that it aligned. And through the process, first I have to say that trust is everything. And I mean that in like trusting that we're going to have guidance, you know, to create this work, but also trusting in your own skill set, trusting that, hey, we haven't done this before, but when we get to the painting part, we're going to kill it because that's what we do. Right. So it was like, hopefully they're going to look like what we imagined. And I do have to say they look way better than I could have imagined. But it was a trust for me. For me, it was very much so like, and even trusting, you know, Cihua, because it was very much like, you know, I'm a person that is like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do it. I don't like to wait for anyone. I don't like to take, what do you call that? Direction from anyone because I'm an artist. Like I'm just going to do what I do. But a collaboration is so different. You know, it is about, you know, stepping back. It is about listening. It is about also recognizing like where my strengths and weaknesses are. Are you better at this? Am I better at this? Oh, you're better at this. Go ahead and do that. It's releasing too this imaginary control.
Yeah, control.
Me,
no,
you know? I'm also a Capricorn, so you know it's very. So for me, it was a whole beautiful challenge, and I think we killed it. I really do. And this piece, we went through it. We talked about so many different things, so many different topics, which was a beauty. Like it was just such a beautiful ceremony to go through it. And getting to the end, you know, like I could almost cry in just seeing that we created it and that it was everything we wanted it to be. It was all about bringing women together in this space. And this was our ofrenda. These two ocelots that are facing each other, that are representing magic, that are representing spirituality, that are representing our ancestors, the dark of the sky, you know, coming out of their mouths, that are representing, for me, very representative of like, there's so much unknown, but then there's like stars within them that are eyes, that are watching, that are observing, that, you know, and then it was interactive. Like they could come in and read about it, see, I mean, literally you're walking into a space where like you're walking into the art. It's quite different to walk into a gallery space and you see these like white walls and there's art on the walls and there's tags. Okay, it's an art show. But walking into the space, you know, and being held really, you know, by these ocelots and by our ancestors, beautiful.
Yes, I love that the space almost became the art. It was entirely interconnected, and that was part of our intention, was to create a piece to reflect the interwovenness, the interconnectedness of all of us. You know, we talked about how the stars are representative of our light, you know, how that we can all shine and without diminishing each other. You know, we did have that interactive piece where people could write on the stars, you know, and stick them onto a representation of the night, you know, so people could really share some of those empowering words. I think it was really beautiful. And, you know, I see the same like challenges like reflected, but I think we did an amazing job. Not once did Did I feel like we were stepping over each other or pushing each other in any kind of way? I think that we worked really well together. So I feel blessed and grateful for the invitation, for the opportunity to do this. I'd never created any such thing. I don't even think I've made an installation before, to tell you the truth. And so it was definitely challenging in many ways, but it was a challenge that I relished, even like I just the next week, after the show, I just kept having dreams about you, just like coming in and just like missing the process. I'm just like, oh, okay. Getting back into the rhythm of the everyday was, I feel like I'm barely getting back into the rhythm now,
Me too. Yeah. I feel like we also created our own portal, and we talk about portals
Yes.
all the time. That's our favorite word. Portal.
Yes.
And so I do feel like we stepped into a portal like you do when, for those of you who are artists, like you block out time and it's crunch time, and then you go, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get up. I'm not even going to take a shower. I'm going to, make myself a coffee, and I'm going to hit the canvas or hit whatever you're doing. And then you start working, you switching your music, drinking your coffee, sticking your paintbrush in your coffee, all of that good stuff, right? And then it's like 3:00, 3 p.m., and you haven't ate anything. And you are like, but you're in the portal, you're in the creative zone. And so it was very much that for days.
Yes.
For days. I mean, we showered,
Yeah.
and our coffees had lids on them, but it was a flow that really reminded me, at least the week after, and it continues to, it reminded me how limitless, like we just fucking did it. We just said, yeah, we're doing this. We did it. And so it reminded me that I'm an artist, because I forget sometimes. Life is so busy and I'm not always on my canvas. And so, sure, like, when people label you and identify you as such, people are, oh, she's an artist, but I forget, because I'm also a wife and a mother and so many other things, and so, a business owner, and, we do all this other healing work. And so, yeah, it just reminded me, you're an artist and look at what you created, and then I wanted, like, in my head, I wanted to have like this show next, like all these masks, and I was just going crazy with the possibilities.
Yes. I love that you said that it reminded you that you were an artist. I think that puts words to this feeling I've been having. I felt the same thing, like, and you know what? It was empowering. It was very like, oh shit, you did that. And you're right. I think we do forget, and it's interesting because we're having this conversation here in Aztlan Libre and in front of this wall that's got all these different art prints of all these different Chicanx artists, and including our own art prints. And so just to see our own work being reflected back to us, just is really reaffirming, like, oh, look at all this amazing stuff that you've done. And this isn't in like a ego way, but it's so important that we take that time to celebrate ourselves, celebrate our accomplishments. It's interesting with that installation. We started it on an ocelot. It was during an ocelot trecena. And today last night we started an acat trecena, which is the read. It's our accomplishments. It's what we've learned. It's putting all these pieces together, and, just really sitting in front of this and being like, okay, yeah, this is what we've been doing for all these years. It's been doing all of this, and it's, nos olvidamos,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also part of like being the vessel, right? Like, I feel like, okay, I'm the vessel, and I forget how much art I have created because it's not sitting directly in front of me. I don't get to like indulge in it all the time, and every art piece has its own feeling. It has its own like spirituality to it. It has its own timing, and regardless of what the rest of life is going like each of them have their own personality. And so, like, yeah, you're right. Sitting in front of these is like, I created all of these and I forgot. I forgot we have the most on this wall too. Like you and I have the most pieces on the wall, and it's like we forget that that we have this ability, and talent, to be able to do this. And for some people, like it's about like the technical pieces, like how good are you, or how, for me as a self-taught artist, it has always been about the message. And the more that we get into art and developing ourselves and growth as artists, the more critical we get of our work, right? Because it's like, okay, the composition and the perspective, and did you get that perspective right? Oh, did you get the hands right? Hands are so difficult for some people, for me included. Did you get the face right? Like all of these things that didn't matter when I began, because when I began, yeah, the artwork wasn't like what it is now for me, but it was very much, the message was always there.
And it almost slows you down. Don't you feel like it almost slows you down? And the next thing you know, it's like you're not producing as much work. Yeah. And, coming back to the installation, I think I really love the novelty aspect of it too. It's like, you don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this. We know about it in theory, but actually executing it and bringing it together was just like, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit. And I think this goes for everyone listening. Don't let yourself be held back by your own limiting beliefs, because don't ask yourself like how you're going to do it. Just trust that you're going to do it, and that it's going to take the time that it needs to. But if you have a message or something that you want to say, an offering that's living in your heart, we have to get it out. We have to get it out. Even if you're scared, even if it's your first art show, even if you've never done art before, de eso se trata, and just thinking about the women that showed, that was their first art show, and just the trust and the bravery that went into doing that. And, we've all been there.
Yeah. I always tell people that, people ask me like, oh, what do you feel about like being an artist, And I always tell people like, it takes courage. That's all it is. It's courage. It's being able to show the world and be vulnerable to show what you're creating, and for me, it's really hard to show, like I do a lot of like, oh, this is a work in progress, because I get excited and I want people to see it. But trust when I say it's a work in progress, please, that's not the end result, but it's one of these things where like, it really is about the courage, it's about the courage. And once you take that step, you'll be empowered by showing it, by saying, oh, I'm working on this, and I do love the fact that neither one of us knew how to do it, but we were so willing, and again, I felt like there was so much guidance. And it was funny, like those things were looking like a Barney at some point, and a giraffe, and people were saying, "Oh, they're this, they're that."
Ducks, yeah.
It was hard. Like it wasn't nice to hear that it was a duck. I was like, "This is not a fucking duck. It's supposed to be an ocelot."
Yeah, but trusting the process.
Yeah, and that's how it is for all the artwork that you're gonna create. That's within you. Like it is about the confidence in that courage that you can put out. It doesn't have to be, amazing the first time. Like try it again. Try a different technique.
I just feel so grateful that there are people out there like you, that have these spaces, opening these spaces, making the space, creating these spaces that give us accessibility and opportunities to so many people in so many different sectors and stages in their journey. For you, like just bringing it back to some of this, is what has been a challenge or what has inspired you to create a space like that?
I think that, when Lucas and I decided to do Aztlan Libre, like we knew it was a shop. We knew it was, we knew it was going to be like more like a community center. Like you could come here and I can print an application for you, give you resources, different things like that. And when we took on the warehouse, it was a warehouse for a long time. It was a working space. But then it was like, for me as an artist, like we used to have art shows in the shop. And so your artwork would be above whatever merch I was selling below, right? On the wall. And as an artist, that never felt right. I was always like, wait a minute. Like, if this is what I have to work with, cool, let's do it, you know? But when we had the opportunity to create a gallery, a small gallery in the warehouse, we took it because we understand that we should be, it's something that Lucas and I talk about a lot. We should be setting our own bars and our own like rules to our own art. You know, like why am I going to go beg an institution to show my artwork when their mission statement doesn't even reflect my people, you know? And it's one of these things where it's like, of course, if Chicano art gets super popular, like every museum is going to want it, you know? But I don't have time for that. Like, I'm not going to wait for, you know, some institution
How many years?
to say, oh, hey, you know, it's like in the history of Chicano movement, the group Asco from Los Angeles, you know, they wanted to show at LACMA. And, you know, I'm not sure what year it was, like 70s, I think, 80s maybe. They wanted to show at LACMA, and LACMA told them no. And they went and they were installation and public art group of Chicanos. And so men and women. And so they went, they wanted to show, LACMA was like, absolutely not. Then they went and they left a few messages for LACMA, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, about 10 years ago, I think I went to a show at LACMA and it was their show and it was Asco. And so it's one of these things where like they did so much more work outside of LACMA, but it's like, you have to create these spaces. We're responsible to our own people to create these spaces. You know, it's the same way where like representation is important. We talked about that. You know, I wouldn't be invited into, you know, other art shows if representation wasn't important, you know? So we have to set our own rules, our own bar. You know, if you need a solo show, like that's our thing, you know? We love doing solo shows because if you've never had a solo show, then it creates somewhat of a portfolio for yourself. If you're going to do a resume, you can put it on your resume. If you're going to show, you know, other places, you know, that you're seeking to have an exhibition at, you can say, hey, I had one here. You know, there's not a lot of prestige to our gallery, but it is a Chicano gallery, you know? And it's one of those things where we're here.
Yeah, no. This is up and coming, everybody. Do not sleep on Galeria Mestizaje, Aztlan Libre.
We're here for it, you know, we're here for it in every sense of the word. Like sometimes we've have held, you know, just panels on like police brutality, or we have held, you know, all the backpacks for like the backpack drive, or I mean, it just goes on and on. Food distributions, so many different things that are done, you know, all together as a community. But it's one of these things where like we need spaces like this. We need a space that can change, that it can be a gallery, but then it can be something else. Like we need these spaces for our people.
Que viva Aztlan Libre.
Que viva.
Que viva. Oh, man, I feel like the power, the animas, you know, are stirring. What advice would you give to other Chicana artists who feel stuck or unsure about the artistic growth or spaces or, you know, being seen?
I think one of the most important things is to just keep doing the work. You know, keep practicing your artistry, keep, you know, and I don't say that practice as in you got to get better. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying keep doing, keep creating. And I really believe that as an artist, when you have something inside of you and you're wanting to show it to the masses, you know, and you're wanting to do that from a place of healing, the alignment will come. I really feel like so much art can be healing just by seeing representation of yourself. These art pieces are going to give you an experience. And when you're doing that from a place of, I want my people to see this, you know, because it's a message for a Chicanita. It's a message for whomever it may be for. I think that things will align. I really do. And so, but of course, seek out places, have conversations. And the most important thing is surround yourself by like-minded people, surround yourself by other artists, bounce off ideas, you know, share your dreams, say it out loud, manifest it. Like, all of these things I think are important in someone's path, and give yourself your own title of being an artist. Some people wait until another artist gives you the title. Like, don't wait. Claim it.
Yeah.
Claim it, like self-declaration. I'm a Chicana artist. I'm going to go out into the world and I'm going to fucking do this and go do it.
That's beautiful. How do you think, as artists and community members, we can support one another in elevating our work and finding our voices?
I think we could use a lot more gatherings, and I think sometimes we've tried doing a Chicana paint night, which, has worked, but I feel like we need more. We need more people. We need more people to come and experience having conversations about art together, and elevating it. Like, what does that even mean to all of us? To me, elevating my own work means, creating a body of work, taking really good pictures of my work, and being able to not necessarily create a portfolio, but being able to go back to that and see where I was and see where I am, and not just look at it as like, oh, it's an art piece, let me just give it away, because someday that art piece will come full circle. That's usually what happens. At least I've noticed in my time,
It's like spending time actively reflecting on the work that you've done.
Right.
And letting pieces exist. I think that a lot of people will crumple up their work, or like you said, give it away, or
paint
don't
over it.
Yeah. Or don't give it the space it deserves. I think that all these things deserve to exist, and we should honor that, because in that moment in time, you were trying to express something, in that feeling, even if si salieron los ojos chuecos, or whatever, like, let it be. Like, that was also where you were in that moment, in your skill level. And if you keep those pieces, later you can reflect and see how you've grown,
Right. Yeah. And I think, like, when we talk about artwork, like, document like what you're working on, document what you're doing, because just imagine that you begin to document at like let's say that I began my journey at 14 years old, right? And I have an art piece from then I can trace that back and I can tell you that I have been an artist since I was 14. But if I had gotten rid of all that work, not paid attention to it, and not dated my work, and then it got to, let's say 25-year-old me, and said, oh, my journey began at 25, I'm really robbing myself of all the practice that I have had from 14 to 25. And so I tell people, like, it doesn't matter what the work looks like then. We all started somewhere, and you cannot expect your art piece. This is a process.
That's true. We started when we were like in kinder, when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a process. Like, you should be so proud of your early paintings, of your early sketches, of all of that. It's an essence. It's like you were getting the messages then, and you were listening, and you can't make that go away. Like, why would you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's almost like it's the denial of the self, of the self. That's beautiful. Well, I think we're nearing the end here of our conversation. What's the biggest takeaway from the art show, both in terms of what it has revealed about our community and what it inspired in you?
I think the biggest takeaway was all of the people who were so excited to show, like, to be in the show, creating the like everyone was trying to create hype around stuff, but I almost feel like opening up a show, an exhibition where we have all walks of life showing, and their excitement is what creates a hype. That was my favorite part. My favorite part was that it was like they were excited to see their work on the wall and everyone else's work. That's exciting because it made me feel like I was like the show is serving its purpose.
It's uplifting.
Yeah. And if no one else came, like, let's say like no one else came but the artists, it's still a beautiful thing because they came to see their own work. And then we had tons of community people come through. And that's a beautiful thing. And, you know, I didn't do the show in March, which is originally it's a March show for, you know, International Women's Day, but I moved it to November and people didn't forget. Like they were still here. They were still looking forward to it. And some of the people who have shown with us for a long time in the past 6 shows didn't make it into this show. And then they were like, hey, I missed it, you know, but it was like, there's always next year. And, you know, the goal is to just keep growing the show so that it keeps empowering other women.
That's beautiful. So, you know, what's next for you, Patricia, in your artistic journey, you know, for Aztlan Libre? How can we support you? How can we continue to support, you know, or yeah.
I think next for me is really focusing on a body of work that I've been kind of like dabbling into slowly. And I think that I've been so cautious because it's such a heavy topic because it is around death and living in death, you know. But it seems to be exhausting. So I really, that's going to be my next step in art is to just create a body of work and, you know, see where it goes, you know, see where it goes. Like it doesn't matter if it just sits with me, but I need to create it. It's what is coming up for me.
There's no way I know you're going to share it.
I will.
I'm really excited to see what that's going to look like. I am a big fan of your work and I feel blessed that I get to look at your pieces every day. I've seen your evolution in your art and it's inspiring for me as an artist as well. And, you know, I hope that I can also grow in that way too. I also hope to create a body of work. You know, speaking of evolution, you know, how do you hope to see Chicana artistry evolve in the coming years?
I think that when I think about Chicana artistry, I think it begins obviously with identity. And so I would like to see like the old, like there used to be like a Chicana caucus and a Chicanas Unidas. And I would like to see more organizations and more groups like that come about because I believe in what the identity has done for me. It's super empowering. And I think that our women really need it right now. This identity piece is from a place of roots, ancestry, you know, being indigenous, activism. And we really all need that right now. It's like pulling together, you know? So I would like to see these kinds of things come out and then the art be, you know, a part of that.
I think this is a great reminder, you know, for those listening, we highly encourage you to support, you know, Chicano artists, you know, visit your local exhibits, you know, find out where those art scenes are, take a road trip, you know, come out, engage in community spaces, have conversations about the challenges and the growth of like individuals in general and how we can see that reflected in the art. I do find that art spaces, you know, even if you don't personally identify as an artist, art spaces are still for you. They are for you. There's an opportunity for you to see yourself reflected in the art back. You know, it's really where you can see yourself in a way that is exalted and beautiful, you know, that you see your story is worth being painted, worth being honored. And it's important to be a witness of that as much as it is to be a conduit of that. So even if you don't feel like drawing or whatever it is, you know, please go out and support your artists. You know, how can people reach you, Patricia? They can follow you, you know, if you can share about Aztlan Libre.
Oh, absolutely. So we are Aztlan Libre. So we're a shop and I also do some healing work. And you can follow us on Instagram under Aztlan Libre. You can see all the things that are happening there, from things in our shop to events that we're having. And up next in our Galeria Mestizaje, you're going to see our annual show, which is called El Barrio No Se Vende, curated by Lucas Cruz. And so that's going to be fun because it's going to be, the theme is Cultura Cura. And so it's going to be fun. There's always an installation in the show. This is the 3rd annual, but it is the 2nd anniversary of our gallery space. And so we're really looking forward to that.
Las felicidades. And what about the people that want to follow you personally, you know, on
You can
Your
follow
artistic
me
journey.
on Arte Paz y Vida.
Muy bien.
That's where I'll be, and that's where you can reach me too. If anyone has any more questions about like, being Chicana, or if are like kind of like interested in what else does that mean? Like, how can we expand on that for you? Like, I'm an open book. I would really love to, share with people what that has been like. I would really love to support your journey. I'm always down for Chicana art, whatever that may look like.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm sure that our listeners are walking away with a bit of gold, a little bit of jade from this interaction. I think these types of conversations are priceless and so necessary. I feel so grateful for you and for having the opportunity to know you and getting to interact with you and talk to you. Yeah, I always share that I always feel so inspired by you. So just thank you so much. And I'm wishing you so much success on your journey. And you know that I'm going to be here along the way to cheer you on.
On for the next installation.
Sí, exactly. Pues, gracias, piloncillos. Thank you for being here with us tonight. Just you can find all my info in the captions, where to follow me, where to follow my journey on Instagram as well. Or if you would like to pick up a copy of my book, Tlatoli Oracle, that is where you may find it. Or if you would like a Tonalamat reading, you may also find the link to that listed in the captions. Thank you for supporting my work, and thank you for listening to this conversation. I hope that you have a blessed week, and we will hear each other next Wednesday. Tas kamati, ometeo.